Hey, it's Jim, and this is FRM Part 1, Book 4, Valuation and Risk Models, and our final 30 questions of our refresher exam. We've got an investment return distribution mean of 18 and a standard deviation of 26%. Loss level has a 1% probability of being exceeded is 4248. Let's go ahead and compute the expected loss conditional on the loss exceeding 42.48. So this is expected loss. So just like back in question 1, you've got to memorize that formula. Here in question 2, you're going to have to memorize the expected loss equation. Now, the chapter tells you pretty explicitly in there that if we've got a mean of 18 and then we look at the loss distribution, you just put a minus sign in front of that because you're just switching it over to the left-hand side, more or less. In addition to memorizing the formula, what we're going to have inside of this slide deck is a couple of problems where we're going to need the critical values from the table. And my advice is just to memorize a bunch of these, like maybe 95% and then 99% and then maybe 99.9%. So look at the equation in the numerator. There's a z squared, so the 2.326, that's 99%. I would just memorize those. Now, of course, GARP could give you kind of abbreviated tables, but I think you're better off in having these memorized. This is what I did when I took the Part 1 exam, and it saved me a little bit of time, probably a little bit of stress. So if you do all the math, you get 5135. Estimating volatility on a bank index rejects a model in which the equal weights are assigned to the squared returns, adjusted by a constant factor lambda. So that should give you some hint there. We have a lambda of 0.55. So the estimate of volatility the analyst makes will most likely. And so what you need to do is try to ask yourself the question, is there anything interesting about 55? And the answer is, yeah, there's a bunch of things that are interesting about 55. And if you look, well, there it is on page 31, that risk metrics tells us that we're an efficient lambda of 0.94, and anything below that causes them to leads to overreaction because that lambda of 55 doesn't capture all the stuff that a lambda of 94 does. And of course, let me just go back here. Pretend I didn't go to that one. All right, so equal weights are assigned to the squared returns in favor of a model where they're adjusted. So this is the exponentially weighted moving average model. That should have been obvious. Let's see. Manufacturing firm approaches a bank for a loan. No publicly traded bonds. No history of default. Let's see. Substantial 10-year loan from the bank. All right. The bank has an internal rating system to evaluate the loan and uses Altman Z-score, even though the local economy is suffering through a recession. So that's probably important. Z-score is 3.2. That's probably important. Bank uses point in time, right? Point in time. So think of a discrete line, chronology, and we're doing the point in time. Let's see. The score and rating are most likely an indication of. And so, So notice some of these choices here. More or less likely default, more or less likely to approve the loan. So you need to go ahead and ask yourself the question, all right, we're in this recession, and we've got a z-score of 3.2, point in time, combine all of those, and we're probably going to come up into less likely to default. The bank is less likely to approve the loan because of the point in time and the suffering. And compare that 3.2 z-score to the 1.8. So if you remember, and it tells you this on page 50. So a z-score of less than 3.2 tells us we have a high probability of default. I'm sorry, a z-score of less than 1.8. Ours is 3.2, so we've got a less likely to default because of point in time and suffering through the recession. There you go. Let's consider a portfolio of loans issued by a bank. Probability of default on all loans equally, 275. Correlation of map transform variables, 55. The 99.9 percentile portfolio default rate. So once again, we're going to have to memorize and apply some kind of a formula. Those of you who are looking on 78, you're going to say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, this is the Vasicek model." I love the Vasicek model. When I teach financial institutions, which is not very often, I show the students this model, and they love it. So there it is. You should note that, gosh, there's the 3.09 that you had memorized from the previous problem. So you're saying, "Oh my gosh, Jim, thank you so much for having me memorize that." There it shows up again, 99.9%. Here's the problem that GARP has in asking you this question. You've got the standard normal and you've got the inverse. So how is GARP going to go ahead and provide you with, this stuff? Wouldn't it be awesome if you could just whip out your Excel spreadsheet and hit one of those functions out there? But of course, you're not going to be able to do that. So you've memorized the 309. Maybe GARP will just give you the 1.92 for the 2.75%. I don't know. Maybe it'll have a table, but either way, you should be able to come up with all this. So you do the math there, you get the 55. You look that up on the table, and you get about 71%. Multiple clients own an option-free bond. Current price $98.46. Option-free bond, that's probably important. Let's see. Express concern about a change in yields and how it would impact the value of their investment. The wealth advisor informs the clients they would prefer a higher convexity if the yield on the bond falls, and computes the convexity for them based on the information. So identify whether the advisor's comments is accurate and estimate the bond's convexity. So we have yield changes there by 50 basis points up and down. So there's our new prices. So we'll have to use that convexity formula. But let's go back and talk about that comment. What's the advisor say? Prefer a higher convexity if the yield on the bond falls. So yield falls, what happens to price? Price goes up, of course, because of duration. Just that regular old inverse relationship, but because of duration. But then the convexity of adjustment is going to raise the bond even more. So we probably like that comment. Let's go ahead and compute the convexity. So we'll do B, comment is accurate, convexity 77.19. Make sure you can compute convexity. So pause the video and do the math pretty quickly. Moving on to the Black-Scholes-Merton option pricing model, the existence of the volatility smile in implied volatility estimate suggests which of those following? Well, let's go back to the BSM model. What do we love about it? It's got 5 input variables, including standard deviation, and those 5 input models, when they estimate a call option price, come up with a pretty accurate estimate, especially when the option is nearly in or nearly out of the money. But one of the assumptions in the model is that whatever input we use for the standard deviation, let's say 20%, that 20% is relevant for options that have exercise prices here in the middle, and then stock prices that are very, very high and stock prices that are very, very low. So what we should see is a straight line if you have standard deviation on the vertical axis, but we see a smile. So why do we see a smile? We see a smile for what reasons? Well, you should know that the volatility smile, that has to do with Black-Scholes. So A is out, binomial model. Black-Scholes-Merton model works poorly for steep in and out of the money. So that's what I was just talking about. Risk-neutral world is not reflective. Actually, the risk-neutral world does reflect reality, even though it sounds kind of counterintuitive if we're only worrying about the first moment of the distribution. But of course, you guys read this in the chapters that it works perfectly. And dividends produce a bias. That's not true. All right, so there we go. B is the correct answer.